John, a joy to see you. Thank you for coming to Birmingham. Now, tell me about your background. You grew up somewhere quite interesting, didn't you?
Well, I grew up in Northern Ireland, which is a large country just offshore from here. And indeed it was interesting, but not always for good reasons.
And was it a Christian upbringing?
I did have a Christian upbringing. My parents were quite unusual people, which is probably one of the main reasons why I'm here this evening. My father ran a shop, employed, I suppose, at maximum about 40 people. But they were Christian without being sectarian. And if you know anything about the history of Northern Ireland, you'll know that that's a highly significant statement. And they showed that by trying to employ equally across the Protestant Catholic divide in the shop. And that cost bombings. And they did that because they believed that every person, whatever they believe, in God or not, was of equal value because they were made in the image of God. So in them I saw demonstrated a living effect of the Christian faith. Secondly, although they were very convinced Christians, they loved me enough to give me space to think, so that I had come to my own conclusions before I went to university. And that has stood me in very good stead all my life. I didn't feel, and I've never felt, that I was saddled with a lot of the baggage that meant that many of my contemporaries, when they got to university, their apparent faith disappeared in smoke because they never had personal convictions about it.
So, Christian parents, Northern Ireland roots, I am sure you arrived at university and had to defend yourself that, well, your faith's all about where you come from. Is that true?
Very true.
And what did you say? I
met it very rapidly, actually. At dinner one night, I remember a student asking me, "Do you believe in God?" And I said, "Oh, sorry, I forgot you're Irish." All you Irish believe in God and fight about it. I'd heard that before many times, but somehow, as these things happen in life, it became a springboard for a lifelong quest. Because I started to say to myself, well, look, this is, I knew, of course, even then that it was a Freudian objection. You're Irish, you're full of Irish genes, and your parents believed in God, and so did your grandparents. So it's a simple equation. It's just Irish genetics. That's all it is. And I thought, how do I really explore this now that I'm in Cambridge and no longer in Ireland? And I thought it would be interesting to get to know as friends people that did not share my worldview, people who'd never been to church maybe, who were agnostic, who were skeptical, who were atheistic even, and from other religions. And so as a result of a single conversation, I set out on a life's quest, and I've been doing it ever since. And the convictions that I have at the moment have been built up by being vulnerable to criticism and assessment. Because even in my teenage years, I was interested in truth. I could see Christianity molding my parents. It made a lot of sense and a lot of meaning. And that was a good start. But I was interested even more in the truth question, whether it's comfortable or not to be a Christian. Is Christianity actually true? And that has set the parameter, in a way, for my life.
Well, I've got to move you on a bit, so let's move you on into your career. And can you explain, obviously it's a career in academia, but what exactly are you, John? What do you get up to?
Oh, I wonder that every day.
Your wife asked me to ask that question.
Oh.
So.
Well, that's good, because perhaps she is getting interested in who I am.
Well, it's only 50 years married this year, so yes. I can imagine that's happening.
Yes, yeah. And I met her on day one at Cambridge. That's the other side of the story. So I ought to answer her question. I've been interested since school days in mathematics, probably because I found I was good at it. And then I developed a real interest in languages. And of course, pure mathematics is one of the most refined of languages. So I ended up doing pure mathematics. And within pure mathematics, algebra. And I've done research in that for most of my life. But at the same time, I was interested in the philosophy of science in the sense that, oh, why does mathematics work so well? How can it be so effective in describing the universe? And where does it sit as a tool in our quest for the understanding of reality? So where does mathematics fit within science? And then our subject tonight, where does science fit in the bigger picture of exploring this world around us and ourselves? And so I've had an academic career, as you say, for many years, but I'm now emeritus, which means I'm old.
I think that's the bit you didn't explain to her. That's what emeritus meant. I think she didn't understand that. Now, I've known you for a long time, and for many years, you used to disappear for long trips, and we didn't really know where you were going. And it was linked to your love of languages, I knew that, but actually you were slipping behind the Iron Curtain, and you regularly slipped behind the Iron Curtain. And then since there's been a more openness in relation to that part of the world, I've seen you travel openly across Russia and Ukraine and that entire region. Tell us, what did you learn from the experience of going into the communist bloc countries?
Well, it was extremely enriching. I suppose learning other languages introduces you to other cultures, and I'm very grateful that I managed to master German and enter into that culture and therefore understood where many people were coming from. But way beyond that, because of this driving interest in understanding where other people were coming from, I was interested to see what atheism did to a culture. And in particular, I spent quite a lot of time in East Germany, where I could see the effects of, for example, the denial of education to anyone beyond 13 who professed to be Christian and wouldn't swear allegiance to the atheistic state. You could palpably see exactly what was happening in the society. And then when the wall fell, I started going to Russia. And there, in one sense, it was even more interesting because they'd been exposed to atheistic Marxism for 75 years. And what I learned was that what happened in their culture was that their atheistic philosophy didn't really teach them to think about big questions. That was quite a surprise. And they were intrigued because they'd never met anybody who was an academic, or most of them had never met anybody who was an academic and a Christian. So I found the interest in what I believed about God and Christianity was much greater than their interest in my mathematics, although they were kind enough to listen to me lecture in mathematics. So it was a very enriching experience. Just one little cameo. A very high-ranking member of the Academy of Sciences. I can hear him today saying, you know, John, he said, we thought we could get rid of God and retain a value for human beings. And we discovered too late that we couldn't. And things like that make a deep impression on you because you're actually seeing the consequences, ideas of consequences, worldviews of consequences, and all of that actually served to strengthen my Christian faith immeasurably.
So here you are, you're in your mid-70s, in your 50th anniversary of being married, and you're a very successful Christian author. We are very fortunate to have you tonight. Thank you for coming. We know you turn down 100 talks for every one that you give these days. So thank you for coming to Birmingham. With such a view, tell us just a few of the things that you've been up to recently.
Well, just recently I've been to Vienna to see the Bruegel art exhibition, which is spectacular. They've gathered the biggest collection of Bruegel paintings, and they're utterly fascinating if you've never seen them. Particularly the paintings of the Tower of Babel, which interest me as a symbol for human ideologies that are trying to reach for the sky. And I went there with my wife, and while I was there, I gave a talk because I spent a lot of my time in Austria, and it was wonderful to see several hundred people come together. But a bit earlier than that, I did a debate in London, a moderated debate with Justin Brierley of Premier Christian Radio as moderator, with Michael Ruse, who's an American philosopher of biology. And that turned out to be a very interesting and fascinating debate. It's actually on YouTube, as most of my stuff is. So more than that, I've been sitting at home. My wife looks after me wonderfully, and I write book after book.
Yes, but you do travel an awful lot too.
I did travel an awful lot.
John, as you do travel and as you meet so many people, do you find today that people are that interested in Christianity?
I think the answer's here tonight. There's huge interest. And thank you so much, all of you, for coming. But as I travel around the world, I find this kind of crowd everywhere. There is a deep vacuum, especially among young people. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Norway with nearly 1,000 young people between the ages of 13 and 19. And they were up for serious conversation about these things because they're fed up, many of them, with the thinness of what they're offered in the media and so on. And they want to be stimulated into thinking. They may not agree with me, but my objective is not so much to get them to agree, but to give them some alternative to the kind of relativism, atheistic naturalism that is being poured at them from the media.
Well, as I leave and leave you to John, I've got to tell you a story that supports that. I was in San Antonio, Texas 3 weeks ago, and I booked an Uber. And as I was sitting next to a 25-year-old Uber driver, he started to chat as to why I was in Texas. And he said, "Oh, I watch a man called Lennox on the internet." He said his name's Professor John Lennox. Do you know him by any chance? Well, John is an extraordinary figure on our internet today, and I'm going to leave you for a chat with John. He's not going to stand up, he's going to sit down, and I'll leave you for a 40-minute talk. Many thanks.